Welcome to Panelism, a podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels we're reading. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask. Hey.
Hello. Welcome back, Taylor. I feel funny saying that because we tape several of these in a day. And
yeah, that's all right.
It's the Wheel of Fortune model where we have to pretend we didn't see Vanna in that dress earlier.
That's right. Yeah.
We tape all of these in 1 month, and then they run throughout the rest of the year, and we're off on the slopes skiing with Pat Sajak.
Right. That's right. What must Pat Sajak be like in real life, like outside of the show? Is he like just a totally different individual? Does he just go hog wild, with beer and hookers and stuff? Like, what does he do? Like, seriously, like, because he's got to basically, to your point, they film multiple ones in a day. He's got to kind of lock in on that persona, and he's been doing that for 45 damn years or whatever it is at this juncture.
Well, and I think he had the same persona when he was a weatherman in Nashville. So there we go.
I forgot all about that little aspect of his career, that little sidestep.
Yeah, I remember it was not too long ago that I read that thing about how many months of the year they work and they're paid like they make an outrageous amount of money.
Yeah.
But yeah, they only work like 4 months out of the year or something. Anyway, you and I are just on that podcast grind,
That's right. That's right.
We can't retire off these podcast royalties yet.
Not yet.
Download us for free. So this is a podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels we're reading, specifically like trade paperbacks and stuff. And regular listeners will know that you have been on a tear of bringing interesting things every week, and I just keep bringing superheroes. That's what I feel like.
That's okay.
Today,
that's the best part about this show, though. You get a little of column A, you get a little of column B.
Totally. I forgot. I did actually do Shirtless Bear Fighter recently.
I was gonna say you don't need to worry too much.
But actually, before that, I had done Domino, which is still running, and I had talked about Mockingbird volumes 1 and 2. And so I think my pick today is going to go right in line with a lot of the things I said about those books, because I'm talking about the Unstoppable Wasp, which is a Marvel book. It was written by Jeremy Whitley, art by Elsa Chartier. I don't know. It looks sort of French. That is always our answer when we hit a name that we have not previously checked out. Sure. As I said, it's Marvel, and it was released in 2017, and the series is over. It is an 8-issue series. There is an interesting note at the end. So I'm going to talk about volumes 1 and 2. There's an interesting note at the end of volume 2 from Jeremy Whitley, the writer, who said this is the original story we pitched. It was 8 issues. So I don't think that it was like a Mockingbird case where it was canceled. If you've heard our episode on that, I talk about how volume 1 is so great and so tight with this really great wrapped up story that's a puzzle box story that goes through all the whatever it is, 5 or 6 issues. And then volume 2 is sort of like the leftover B-sides, because the book that was sort of announced it would be canceled, and I think they produced those next 3 or 4 issues or something knowing they were going to be canceled, so they couldn't get into anything too deep. This does feel like it is all contained and whole in these 2 volumes, with one little weird exception I will talk about. But I think it stands next to those books. Bobby Morse, who is Mockingbird, appears in the Unstoppable Wasp. At the time that this showed up, I was sure that they were launching the standalone Wasp book to coincide with the movie Ant-Man and the Wasp, and just sort of bring Wasp out on her own. Little did I know they're not actually related.
Oh,
so
all right.
We're going to get into that too. I just wanted to preface that a little bit before I read you the back cover description, because this is going to give away the ghost a little bit when you hear the names. Anyway, the back cover says Nadia spent the entire first half of her life as a captive of the Red Room, but now this teenage super scientist is spreading her wings. Hank Pym's daughter has a lot of time to make up for, and she's determined to change the world. With Jarvis at her side, she's on a mission to bring together the brightest girl geniuses of the Marvel Universe, starting with Lunella Lafayette, the miraculous Moon Girl. Side note, if you're in Nashville, that is pronounced Lafayette. But Nadia didn't count on evil scientists, man-eating giant rats, or devil dinosaur, or the lethal lady wrestlers known as the grapplers. And even as Nadia's recruiting drive continues, the Red Room is on her trail, and they'll put out all the stops to get her back. And the geniuses of GIRL find a way to save Nadia from being dragged back to the bunker.
Okay, so right out of the gate, is the fact that their acronym GIRL in any way sort of off-putting to you, or is it cute and kind of non-creatively offensive?
It is cute and non-creatively offensive because this book is definitely written for the tween to teenage girl audience.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. So it is I believe so GIRL stands for Geniuses in Action Research Laboratories. But I wanted to read that back cover.
But Todd, that spells Jarl.
Jarl. Yeah, the action is, I guess it's one word, inaction.
Okay.
Geniuses in action.
Wait, what?
Oh no, that's all right. Anyway, I wanted to read that back cover because if you're familiar with the hit movie Ant-Man and the Wasp, you might think, hey, Hank Pym's daughter is named Hope. And this is Nadia. So there is what they've done with this story is apparently this was alluded to in some issues of, oh man, I can't even remember. It's like All New Avengers or something. This is a classic case of like Marvel threw out like this character of this new Wasp and sort of teased her backstory and then put it in the hands of a writer to flesh out and actually come up with that. In other words, I don't think the backstory existed until Jeremy Whitley wrote it, but he kind of had some milestones that he had to cover in it. So Nadia, another thing is very confusing. Let me point this out about the back cover, because she says this in the book is, I spent the first half of my life. Yeah, she's 16. Hopefully that was just like the first, fifth of her life.
Okay,
that's not half. Like, Let
me ask you this: is Nadia a character that we know from Marvel canon prior to this? Is this like a retake on some? Okay, but is Hank's daughter always Hope in previous?
I don't know that she is,
books?
But I don't think that she has ever been Nadia, because the story with Nadia is that Hank was married before Janet.
Oh,
and
what?
Yes, and he was married to a Russian whose last name I'll never be able to pronounce, even though it didn't look that hard. But her first name is Maria. And but little did Hank know that. So they were married. She became pregnant, and I believe she was kidnapped by the Red Room or something like that. And her daughter was taken hostage there, and then she was killed. Maria, this is. And so Hank didn't necessarily know he had a daughter from Maria. That is the story here. So Nadia is this secret daughter of Hank Pym's. And at this point in the Marvel universe, Hank Pym is dead. And I'm not sure the circumstances around that. So I don't actually know if he has come back at this point or not. But that's that's our starting line. And that's where the Unstoppable Wasp takes place, is with Hank Pym dead. It starts out right away, like New York City, Miss Marvel, not Captain Marvel, but Miss Marvel is with Nadia and sort of shepherding her around. So obviously they're aware of, who she is. The Avengers are kind of protecting her. She is in fact like a young Avenger or something like that. She seems to be operating with the agreement and understanding of the Avengers, but she's
officially licensed franchise.
Yeah, it's not that thing that that they played off of a lot in the Spider-Man movie, where there's sort of he has a minder and he's not supposed to be engaging in Avengers business. It's like, just stick to your friendly neighborhood or whatever.
I love that we can reduce Happy Hogan now to like a North Korean minder, like just kind of following around, like waving you away. No, don't look.
That was pretty much what he was playing in that movie, right? Yeah, much different than when he was so outgoing as Foggy Nelson in Daredevil.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Wow. So wait.
deep Jon Favreau pull.
So Jon Favreau was in a shitty Marvel movie before he directed a really good Marvel movie
Yeah.
and kind of launched all that. Wow.
Yeah.
I totally forget about that Daredevil movie. I just remember that terrible scene with Colin Farrell jumping on a car and like throwing like toothpicks or paper clips or some such nonsense, like 5 city blocks. Getting it. It's just like, okay, none of that's ever gonna happen.
Everything was so weird
Just like
in that
what
movie.
is...
But I don't know where I went off there. Anyway,
You invoked the worst
yeah.
Marvel movie of all time. That's what happened.
The Minder. So in this Jarvis, this is one of those things where I've not paid attention to like canon comics in so long that when I dip in and out, my only points of reference are the movies. So Jarvis is actually the name of a human butler in the Avengers.
Okay.
Which I just was not aware of, but that is the Jarvis that is minding Nadia.
Okay.
So, Ms. Marvel has this little interaction with her at the beginning, and we get to know a little bit of Nadia's character. Nadia is not out like superheroing all the time. She's really just fascinated with freedom now that she's out of the Red Room. I assume I don't even know that this term, the Red Room, was used with Black Widow, but that is where she was trained to be an assassin, is the Russian Red Room.
I was going to ask about Black Widow, if she had encountered her.
Yes. And Nadia is aware of Natasha. I think Natasha's the one who helped her get out and brought her to the States. There's also this weird thing which is like, I just didn't know this was going on in sort of canon comics right now, canon superhero comics, where like at one point some Russian agents show up and they're holding a badge that's like the hammer and sickle, as though it's the Soviet Union, which is it's just very weird. Like, this is a thing that happens in Archer, but in Archer it's clear that like Archer's constantly playing with timelines and references and stuff. Everyone uses like an old-timey computer and has like phones on their desk and stuff, so it's just this way of being like, hey, it's a Cold War story, but we know we're not in the Cold War anymore, so we have to kind of have all these weird anachronisms. But it was just bizarre to me that these agents show up with a Soviet shield. Maybe
there's some other event you missed in the current Marvel universe.
So yeah, possibly. Nadia is now in America. She's living in Hank Pym's old, or like his house that he still owns, that still has all his stuff in it. So it's kind of part discovery mission for her to like understand this father that she never met, that everyone always told her she was a genius. When she was in the Red Room, she was part of what they called the science class. And they used these kids who were very smart to design technological weapons and things like that. And so she ended up, because she was told so much about her father, figuring out how Pym particles worked, and so built several weapons for the Russians based around these Pym particles. And whatever the starting point was for her in all new Young Avengers or whatever, she now, like, she has a costume and the wings of Wasp. She is fully Wasp. That's not like an origin story for Wasp in this. This is just her exploring that freedom in America. And what she sets out to do right away is put together this group, GIRL, the Geniuses in Action Research Labs. And initially she sees it as just a bunch of smart, science headed girls that all work out of Hank Pym's house with all his equipment. So she uses Jarvis in that quest and gets Jarvis to like drive her around, and she, one by one, she's made this list of who all the smartest girls are in the world, but also she knows, there's 5 of them in New York City, so we're going to get them first. And so the first volume is very much concerned with her recruiting them, and their various reactions. Some of them are like, oh my gosh, you're Hank Pym's daughter, and they're like, of course I'll do whatever you want to, whatever you suggest, because he's such a great scientist. And then there are, there's at least one that has a very teenage girl problem of like, she's just getting in with the popular girls at school, and she doesn't want to show her geek side because, she knows her very strict Indian parents will make her pursue that, and she would rather just be a popular girl and fit in and not stand out anymore. And that girl, steps outside with Nadia for a few minutes out of her parents' store. And in that brief moment of time, these two wrestlers that were alluded to on the back cover try to rob that store. These, lady pro wrestlers gone bad. So they're they're kind of, you remember the second season of Glow where they just pulled off bank heists.
Oh yeah.
Where they so these women are like very large, but they're not super powered, and they're out of work because the wrestling world doesn't want strong ladies anymore. They want pretty ladies and who are skinny. And so these two ladies are holding up this the store, and Nadia tries to reason with them, and then when they won't listen to her and they threaten violence, she was raised in an assassin school, so she responds with violence and just kicks their asses. And Jarvis is standing there like, do I need to call the Avengers? And then they're wrapped up right away. She does run into Moon Girl, who is in this book called Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I don't know anything about her except that she's 9 years old and has this giant Tyrannosaurus Rex that's red that is like her companion. And she is supposedly the smartest person in the world. So she has a bunch of like gadgets. She's more of a Iron Man kind of superhero, I guess.
Okay.
So
let me jump in because you said she was on a quest to find the smartest girls. Does this take place in the Riri Williams Iron Man timeline, or does that reference at all?
I would think, it's funny because Riri doesn't come up, I think.
I mean, if she's collecting smart girls, that'd be a good one to add to your list.
That is a good question. And I think timing wise, from when this book came out, Riri would have been in the armor already. So maybe that's why she wasn't in it. But good question. So there's sort of the series of vignettes in volume 1 of her putting together this team, and one of the other girls from the Red Room finds her, and expects that Nadia will treat her with animosity, and instead she's so happy to see her and wants to be friends with her and all that kind of stuff. And this confuses this girl that's, and then we learn over the course of this story. I won't get into spoilery details, but that girl is still, even though she, that initial encounter with Nadia shows Ying, the girl's name, that that Nadia like has these very pure feelings of friendship for her and doesn't treat her like an enemy now that she's out of the Red Room. But it's clear that Ying is still under the thumb of the Red Room and operating at their orders. So there's sort of a, fox in the hen house kind of situation here where that comes up later. And fortunately, the girls that Nadia's put together, they all respond, to help Nadia out, but it also ends up helping Ying out. And there's that tense moment of is she going to appreciate this help or whatever? And it's, it's a story you can imagine, but it's still fun here. What I really wanted to, one thing I really wanted to touch on there is that this great thing starts happening near the end of volume 1 and carries into volume 2, which is that Janet Van Dyne, Hank Pym's ex-wife, becomes this sort of surrogate mother for Nadia. And it's, it's almost in a, like bailing her ass out of trouble kind of thing.
She's the original Wasp as well, so I would imagine she has some good pointers.
She's actually the current Wasp.
Oh, she is? Oh, okay.
So yeah, there's just 2 Wasps. But she's still active.
Now wait, is this who I see on the cover of volume 2 is Janet and Nadia? Okay.
Yeah, Janet's in the yellow and Nadia's in the red.
Nice, okay.
Yeah, so she becomes this mentor and, surrogate mother figure to this girl so there is this interesting relationship of she calls her stepdaughter, but this is the daughter of her ex-husband's first wife, and not that there should be definitely not any animosity, but it's like, she, it's just literally a stranger to her. Like she grew up, Janet didn't know this girl existed. So what we see is this really great characterization, I thought, written into Janet of, Janet does have to come out and be deliberate and spell it out for us a lot. Like, I never saw myself as the motherly type, that kind of thing. But I think we do see that, it's not begrudging. It's just that unfamiliarity with how to be close to a young girl and how to mother her. And there's a really great payoff in so anyway, after these, let me talk about the payoff in a second. This incident where all the girls come together to help out Ying and Nadia and sort of, show Ying that there is good, in the world, and that, she doesn't have to be under the thumb of the Red Room. That gets all the girls in trouble with their parents, just that action. And then the way Janet, there's a great payoff in that Janet smooths over those things. And so, there's another great scene of Janet in volume 2, we really get in Janet's head, and it's like Janet's telling the story, and she's talking about, there's a great scene where she discusses like, it's almost meta commentary. She's saying, a lot of Avengers fanboys always thought, why is there a Wasp in the Avengers? She can fly, but so can Iron Man. She can shrink, but so can Ant-Man. She's just duplicating the powers of these other people. And she says, so they criticize, they level all this criticism at her. And it's clear that it's like, yeah, that's what Marvel fanboys were. That's the criticism they were leveling at her as a character.
Mm-hmm.
But as she's doing this, the panels are showing her making all these phone calls. And then her narration is, but the thing is, like, I'm a fixer, and I'm like the manager. And so what the payoff is that later we see that she has, it worked her unique brand of, like charisma and all the sort of powers at her command, because she is now the chairman of the PIM Labs or whatever it's called. So she's able to sort of make some deals with people and call in some.
Wait. She goes from Red Room to chairman of PIM Labs.
No. This is Janet.
Oh, Janet. Sorry. Okay.
Janet,
I was like, whoa.
So we're seeing Janet like really work it out. And step in at, like step into that leadership role that Nadia needs, but also it shows her off as like an independent, her own independent person outside of the Avengers, and she's fixing these things that she talks about how the Avengers, they're all about helping people, but they're not always there to make sure that those people they help, like, that their lives get better afterwards.
Oh, and see, I like that. That is a theme they've played with a few times in Doctor Who for the same reason, where it's like, and there was a couple heavy-handed episodes now and then where it's like, you never stick around to see what happens after you leave. It's like he always solves the day, or now she, but solves the day and then like moves on. And so there's always juicy storytelling to be done when you can sort of see, well, what happens after that? Like, how do they put themselves together? How do they, is it like a drug where people get so used to having that thing, whether it be the Avengers or whoever it is, that they can't then function for themselves, and it's, creates too much imbalance? Like, those are juicy questions to ask.
Yeah. And it gives so much to that character who, was almost like playing the sidekick to Nadia when she was introduced into this story, and so they do this great thing where volume 1 ends on this cliffhanger of, Nadia has, sorry, names keep getting screwed up in my head. Nadia has spent so much energy putting together the group. And then this one incident happens with Ying from the Red Room that, of course, causes a big problem, and it's played out in that great Marvel fashion of like, all the law enforcement agencies act the way they should, like it's not like a DC book where the corrupt police show up and they just let the vigilante heroes like run over everything. It's like, the cops show up and it's like a big freaking deal that this house is almost blown up. So that causes problems. And Janet's sort of left there standing on the lawn, like, how do I help this girl and help all of these girls? And then volume 2 picks up and we're in Janet's head, watching her put together, like just making things right. And I don't know, it's just really satisfying. And like you say, it offers that rich storytelling place to begin from, like, let's make things better after the incident happened.
Tell me more about the art. What was your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, it's very, like, it's appropriate for that audience. So also like the Janet storyline and stuff there, and the acronym girl, these are, could be heavy handed if you're coming into this as an adult reader. It might seem a little corny. The art at times reminds me of, like, I don't want to get, like, it just sort of an Archie comic look.
Okay.
But not too much. And it has a lot of the, like, I like the sort of hipster references in it that Batgirl had when Babs Tarr took over, and definitely like when Babs Tarr did the art on the whatever the Batgirl New 52 or Rebirth or whatever the hell it was called. Rebirth, I think.
Mhm.
And made like when they situated Batgirl in like a hipster area of Gotham.
Mhm.
So, you know, there's like, you'll see Nadia's got like really sharp bangs, but then someone will call it out, you know, kind of thing. Or,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
so, one of the girls shows up with chai tea and there's sort of like,
Haters gonna hate is what that
oh,
sounds like.
what's chai tea and that kind of thing. But so it's like the storylines, the art is a little bit like kind of junior to what I'm used to reading, but it still totally suits the story. And so I was happy going through it. And this is probably as good a time as any to bring up what I alluded to earlier with the, like I said, it's all wrapped up except for this one little thing I'll talk about. Which came up in the Mockingbird episode, if you recall, which is that this, in my opinion, totally dumb Civil War II crossover thing happened. And so at the end of volume 1, there is like this great cliffhanger. You know, it's not great. It's not like Game of Thrones. Like, you're not on the edge of your seat in suspense. What's going to happen to these girls? Are they going to get in trouble with their parents? But it's that thing of like, we want to see the consequences after the thing that happened, you know, like
Yeah.
this thing where law enforcement was called. What happens to these teenage girls? And it's sort of, especially in the digital version, like there's a cover where you see the two wasps again. No, sorry. You see the sort of the aftermath, like what would naturally happen next or whatever. But the next issue, all of a sudden the art changes and it's more grown up and it's more like just comic book standard sort of run of the mill comic book. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's like, you've seen it before. You've seen that style. And you like, on one hand, it's great that you are so aware that you are no longer in the story you just were, but it is a terrible place to put this, to jam in.
And it's a teaser for Civil War II.
It's one of those like crossover things that Marvel does where, you know, they'll have a Civil War series that's really only like 6 to 12 issues, but then they'll put out special issues for all of these heroes that are involved.
Yeah.
Just to sort of try to get people buying all of the, you know, tangential issues. And so it fully pulls you out of the story for this weird team up between the two wasps that is only related to Civil War. It's not even really related to Civil War. Like, it's just, that's the background of it. And this thing happens that in no way informs anything that happened before in the book or after.
Wow.
And it was so frustrating to me. And that very same thing happened in Mockingbird. And it was even, well, I don't know. I was about to say it was even worse in Mockingbird, but because there was such a play in Mockingbird on like the feminist agenda of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like a very intentional flipping the gender roles and having like a beefcake kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden at the end of this book, here are these Civil War episodes and you're seeing all that cheesecake stuff. Like, you're seeing the women of the universe drawn in the, you know, traditional comic book cheesecakey style. And that sort of that totally throws you off. Actually, this throws you off just as much because it's like so oriented to this certain audience and this girl audience. And I mean, if I don't know, if you're a teenage girl reading this and you're like, wow, this is really awesome. That's all these.
Does it feel like, hey, I'm a teenage girl reading this, and oh, now the boys have to intrude in at the end of my story with their nonsense? Does it almost feel like that, where it's, you know, it's, we have this special thing that's ours, and now that's being corrupted by this other, you know, other. Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah, but fortunately they don't pull in too many of the boys. You know, it's really like a pure wasp on wasp story, and it does actually
wasp on wasp,
wasp with wasp. It does advance a little bit of the Hank Pym conflict.
It's not for boys at all. Wasp on wasp action. Sorry.
But it gives you a little bit more of the Hank Pym thing, because one of the dynamics in that relationship is that Janet sees Hank's impulsiveness in Nadia and her obsessiveness. And so that is the at issue in that Civil War chapter. It's just so, it's really that thing that you and I talked about where it's like the art is going to communicate to you so much about the story. And when it radically changes from, its more cartoonish self to this more self-serious superhero look. It's sort of like it doesn't really matter what the story is, even though the story like kind of keeps in the same vein.
Mm-hmm.
It's just useless, and I really wish they had not done it and instead put out a trade paperback that was just seriously the arc, like the
Mm-hmm.
story arc. And they even could have combined, like, why not just put out an 8-issue trade and put the whole story arc together, and there's just one volume of the
Oh,
Unstoppable.
so that doesn't exist at all? It's just completely on the back of these issues?
Right. Well, sorry, I don't know
Sorry, because I,
exactly
I
what you're
thought you
asking,
were
but
I thought you were describing this, knowing that this was just originally eventually collected anyway in its own thing, but it's not even that
oh
arc
no,
doesn't even
this is
exist.
the collection. So the
Mm.
collection of those 8 issues that exist is volume 1 and volume 2, and at the end of volume 1 is where this Civil War story is just shoehorned in.
But
I mean,
does that whole story start and end in volume 2 then, or does that? Do I
yes.
have
So
to?
then,
Okay.
great question. So then, volume 2 picks up where issue like 4 of volume 1 ended. So it's
Okay.
like it ignores the whole Civil War issue.
Oh, I see. So a lot of volume 1 is devoted to the Civil
Yeah,
War
and not a
arc.
lot, but like
Gotcha, okay.
you're at this cliffhanger point, and then all of a sudden you read this dumb Civil War story,
I see. And you're
and then
like,
you get
they need
back
to fill
into
this
it
up.
with volume
Okay.
2. So
Okay.
that's actually why I ended up doing both for our episode today, was because I was like, well, this is just dumb. There's no point in me discussing
Yeah.
the first half of this without the second half of Janet's story and everything. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and which is that oh boy, I just lost it. I had this bookmarked, and I did not pull it up before we started recording, but I know there's been a lot of discussion basically about Hank Pym's treatment of Janet, because Hank was a domestic abuser.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know exactly. I'm not familiar with that arc, or the way that was treated at the time or anything like that. But I know that it's been written about over the past few years with the Ant-Man movies coming out, and how Hank Pym was kind of shitty. In fact,
Yeah.
it was a comic book, CBR.com, that did uh, a big thing this summer on how they're trying to retcon the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So I like, there's this absolutely doesn't. I don't think the Unstoppable Wasp retcons that, and it does not necessarily address it as directly. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. I was about to say as it should,
Mm-hmm.
but it is great that they address it.
Okay.
And what they do is like, and it's also just narratively, it works so well. There's a moment in this story when, as you like, as a good storyteller would do, right as everything is sort of going up, and it looks like everything's going to work out, and it's just like the emotional motion is going up. Nadia becomes aware that her father abused Janet, and she only
Interesting.
has a relationship with Janet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she and Janet have to talk about that. And
Wow. Ooh.
that, I thought, and I'm happy to be corrected, uh, I, I thought it was treated pretty sensitively and in character.
Good.
It's important to note that like a man wrote this issue. So I would like to hear a woman's take on that. But what I could hear in that voice of Janet's, the way he wrote it, was that if she wasn't exactly sugarcoating things,
Mm-hmm.
but it was definitely in that way of like, she's speaking to a child and she is not going to give the child all the details.
Yeah.
And so to directly address it, I thought was kind of like the best we could hope for in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Janet could not have an adult conversation with Nadia in that moment, but she did not deflect it. She didn't try, like, I thought it was very well handled. Like, as this is how an adult, a very responsible adult, would handle that. Like, they don't tell her like, oh, don't worry about that, or anything like that. Like, it's not brushed over. And
Had Janet and Hank gotten divorced before he died?
oh, you're stumping me on that one.
Well, the reason I ask is because I'm curious if that relationship colors the Nadia Janet relationship all the more because Janet's like, hey, look, there were good parts of Hank that I did love, and he's got this kid here that didn't know her and she didn't know him. Maybe I can be the bridge between the two of them and show her the best parts of Hank, and then take from her the best parts of Hank that I miss, and sort of have that fulfilled on both sides. I could see that being. Maybe she looks at it that way. They probably don't get that in depth with it.
No, actually, they do.
They do? Okay, great.
And it's pretty good. Like she pretty directly says that.
Oh,
like,
great.
He did act like a hero at times, and he did save the world, at times, but he was also evil at times.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting about it, and this is the part that I don't, it's a fine line between, I don't think they're excusing the behavior, but obviously I think that's open to debate. But what Janet does, which I thought it was important, was that she addresses the mental health aspect of it. Okay. And she says, Hank didn't seek treatment for these things, and he should have. And I believe she even says, like, not that she's blaming herself, but I think she even alludes to, like, I should have left him at that time, or I'm sorry, I don't want to inject anything into this serious, part of the debate, but it's like, it just puts that other layer on it of when she is doing, handling Nadia in certain ways, it's because she does see some of those traits in Nadia that could lead to something destructive.
Yeah.
If Nadia is not aware of it, and if Nadia doesn't take the right self-conscious actions to mitigate that in herself. And so it is in that way that the one little Civil War story ties into it, because that is about Nadia's obsession on fixing something with science rather than dealing with the human component of it.
And
Janet does get to tell her that in that moment, so that theme does play into the second volume. Still wish they hadn't had the Civil War II stuff at all, but
that's how you really feel, Todd.
I think it just it that comes so late in the book, and but it ends up being like such a kind of emotional a bow on the whole thing. Of like, we've seen Nadia is so exuberant through this. She's so excited to put together these girl geniuses and to have this laboratory and all this stuff, and to collaborate with girls on a thing that's not destructive, and then to have to confront that in her own past that she was really just not aware of. And I don't know. I just thought it was handled really well. And it kind of like drew me into the story a little bit more, I think, because of that. And I would say, when I was reading the first volume, I kind of thought, I don't know if this is worth discussing on our podcast, because it's, definitely like it's so directed at a particular audience. But I almost think now that it's like, no, like if you're at all a superhero fan, this is probably a great book to read, because of the way it's going to like subvert your expectations, with those themes. It really deals with those human themes really well. And I ended up, just thinking it was great. It does not ever take the corny joke route out that Mockingbird sometimes did. And Mockingbird 2 addressed very serious themes.
Well, that was almost like a Deadpool sort of spin-off in some ways.
Yeah. Something. Yeah, exactly. Especially for a book that is so geared towards young girls and the science minded and stuff, I thought this was, just really, really well done. There are a whole bunch of like, Nadia's science notes kind of narrative blocks in there where she's in the middle of a fight and she will explain to you the science behind Krav Maga or something. You're like, wow, that's a pretty cool thing to do. And it's one of those things that we're used to seeing in like image books or something, where they do great graphic breakdowns of stuff, but superhero book. So that is The Unstoppable Wasp. You've probably picked up on it. I would say this is like recommended if you like Mockingbird, or if you like the Batgirl that Babs Tarr did, or I would say that if you got like the new run of Archie books and you want to read a superhero book in that style, this is probably a great one.
And this is volumes 1 and 2, correct?
Yes. And both from 2017. I believe maybe the second one came out this year, but it's done. Series is over. I don't know where Nadia is in canon right now, but it's a great thing to read. Like, you could read them both, in a day or two. And
I thought you were going to end that with, but I wish her well.
Yeah.
The stars align for you, young girl or young hero, as you go off on your journey. What, I guess, physical or digital?
So I read them both digitally. These are two of those that I picked up during that huge Marvel sale on Kindle and
Oh
Comixology months ago.
yeah,
So they were, but I looked them up today on Amazon, as I was doing what I'll call, generously call research, but really just grabbing the back cover copy. And in paperback, they're both like at $10 or under $10. So
cool.
it might be kind of fun if you're a fan of the art, like check it out online. Grab them on Amazon for a cheap amount, or of course, support your local comic book store by buying them there.
Yeah.
I did read them on Comixology. I liked it that way. It just sort of, it suits the subject matter.
Mhm.
And I actually liked having some of the panels just blown up like really big. Like you could tell on the page, this was a small panel, but because it fit so perfectly on the screen, it would kind of expand a little bit. And it just gave it a more, like television feel to it.
I love that about Comixology guided view is that it makes every panel just as important. So you get a different feel. You got to be really careful with that though, because some things built for print, you don't want to mess with that sort of the way you interact with each panel. But on digital, it's especially if it's with some of these newer titles, like we've talked about before, some of these sort of that feel more like television anyway, just by the nature of the story. It's great to view them one panel at a time. It just gives it more of a cinematic approach. Yeah.
But if you do get the paper, feel free to tear out that Civil War II story. Or honestly, maybe not.
You're not gonna let it go, are you?
But what you could do with paper, I think, is more quickly recognize where it's coming up and just not read it, read volume 2, and then come back to it later. Like it's fine as an informative thing, but you're gonna want to hit that first issue of volume 2.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to
imagine being one of those people that had to wait in between the release. You got to read them both back to back. Like imagine the people that's like, well, I guess in 4 months I'll know what happens.
I know it's super dramatic, but I just think of the, a new reader getting into this, whether it's a girl or a boy or however they identify, getting into a comic book and being like, oh, wow, a science influenced hero who emphasizes nonviolence. This is so unique. And then inserted right in the middle of it is this jackass two crossover.
Did you ever wonder what would happen if the two Wasps teamed up and fought with the Avengers for something? Let's find out. And just like, there you go.
I mean, thank God they're not involved, but it's like, the whole setting of Civil War II is that Hawkeye has killed Bruce Banner.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But also it just like they even describe the whole plot of Civil War II in this issue. Sorry, I'm going way over time on this, but it doesn't have the weight of the first Civil War series.
Oh yeah.
And why even bother? Anyway, sorry.
Event Comics. See, this is what happens when you let series run on way too long. The publisher is beholden to that instead of new creative output.
I've gone over time just due to my angst at Civil War II. Taylor, where can people find this show?
Find us at panelism.inc, both online as a website, panelism.inc, and that is our Instagram handle as well, panelism.ink. You can find us anywhere podcasts are downloaded. Just search for Panelism or find our feeds at panelism.inc again. And please subscribe. Please share with your friends too, and leave us a review anywhere you can. That always helps us and helps the show. Same thing with comments on social media. All that, good or bad, is just helpful for visibility and letting other people create conversations. So we'd appreciate it if you could do that. Anything else from you, sir?
I don't think so. Thanks for chatting with me about the Unstoppable Wasp.
It's been a good one, and can't wait to pick that up as well. And can't wait for our next episode. I will see you then.
All right. Talk to you later.